A horror movie written and directed by a woman, and it's all about nasty VHS movies.
It's right up your alley.
Butchery, sadism, murder.
A wave of depraved and corrupt horror video.
Confusing fiction with reality.
Hey everybody, Lindsay here, and this is my review for Censor. Censor tells the story of a woman who is a censor of video nasties in the 80s in Great Britain. Her job consists of watching disgusting, bloody, vile, degrading films and deciding which ones should be approved with some cuts and which ones should be outright rejected. During her job, she sees a film that sparks some memories about the disappearance of her sister when they were children. And that takes her down the road where the lines between reality and these video nasties that she's been watching start to blur. It is written and directed by Prano Bailey-Bond, I think I'm saying that name right, and it stars Naima Algar? Again, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but that's what I'm going with. This film debuted at the 2021 Sundance Film Festival during the midnight section and was pretty well received. It's not playing anywhere near me because I live in the middle of nowhere, Iowa, but I was able to rent it off of Amazon. And overall, I really enjoyed it. I've got a few problems with it, which we'll get into, but overall, it was extremely entertaining and fun to watch. What I like best about this film is, one, the subject matter. Okay, as you can see behind me. I love that they centered this film around the video nasties of the 80s. There was a huge hysteria in Britain at the time that these films directly influenced violence that was going on and that they were a menace to society and needed to be censored or stopped completely. Something to liken it to here in the US would be like the heavy metal satanic panic of the mid-90s, where we had congressional hearings and Dee Snider of Twisted Sister had to testify, all that stuff. That's probably the closest related thing that I can liken it to.
Yes, except I'd like to clarify something. I said no authority has the right or necessary insight. I didn't say you weren't able to. I said you don't have the right, or I don't have the right, or the RIAA. Also, we're talking about the airwaves as opposed to a person going with their money to purchase an album to play in their room, their home, on their own time.
Of course, we had video nasties here in the United States as well, but they weren't picked up as much in local news, etc., as much as they were in Britain. To get a hold of video nasties here in the US at the time, you either had to go to a locally owned video store where they would have them behind the counter or maybe in a special section, or you had to go to like some conventions and things like that. People would have booths and stuff at their tables, but other than that, mainstream, you were not going to find them. And they have a scene in this movie that kind of reflects that. But getting back to the stuff that I liked, of course, the subject matter. I thought the acting was very well done by, what's her name? Naima Algar. Naima Algar. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. I don't know. Naima Algar is the star of this film. She does a very good job. She is very contained with her acting. You can just feel how bunched up she is through the entire thing. There's several instances where she cracks her shoulders back because she's just holding everything in, just trying to hang on by the barest of threads. And I love that bit of business where she cracks her back or she's like digging at her fingernail. It shows so much, it tells so much by showing so little. Just those little movements tell us so much about her character, and I love that.
This depiction is dangerous.
Come on, Enid.
I'm cutting it.
The cast of characters around her are pretty well done. You have the people that she works with, you have her boss, you have the sleazy movie producer, and her parents, who are very detached from her. And, you know, they had to go through the whole emotional trauma of losing a child. And it's been decades since this happened. So they are just trying to move on with their life, but they have this other daughter who cannot move past it and is still consumed by it. And they're doing their very best to detach from that, and they're doing it in probably the least helpful way possible. I mean, we don't know what they've done up to this point, but they're not really handling her trauma and her illness very well. They aren't very helpful or engaged, it seems.
You've never been clear on exactly what you remember.
Another thing I like about this film is the color palette. There's lots of greens and blacks, and then deep, deep reds, and then you get some neon stuff with the more dream sequence scenes. And I love the imagery of the VHS tapes. They show it going into the VCR, and then the innards of the VCR, and a bunch of static and tracking issues stuff. I love that. I love all of that in this film. Now I'm going to get into a few things I didn't like. The stuff with her sister's disappearance is pretty muddy. We don't know exactly what happened to her sister, and maybe we don't need to. But for me, a little more clarity on it would have made the transition at the end even more impactful. And there's a lot of times where we don't get a good sense of what reality actually is within this film. So when they switch back and forth between reality and a dream or fantasy, or what's going on in her mind versus what's really happening, we're not really grounded enough for it to have as much of an effect as it could. It still has a pretty profound effect, but I think it would have been even stronger if we had that tether, that strong tether to what reality is. But it doesn't ruin the film. It was just something that kind of threw me off at a few points. But I do appreciate the subtlety that they use in this film, as far as like the media's involvement in what's going on and how they draw their conclusions from these video nasties to some violent acts that happen in the film, and how this mania can affect people. And I was watching a couple interviews with the director, and the germ of this film came from, you know, she was researching into this phenomenon that happened in the 80s with the censorship and stuff with the video nasties and the hysteria behind it. And she thought, well, if being exposed to these films does detrimental things to our mental health or our psyche or our safety, then what does it do to a censor who has to sit there and watch everything, the things that aren't suitable for the general public to see? How does it not affect them? How is it okay for them to see it but not the general public? How can they not be affected by it if these things are so damaging as they say? Which I think is a clever idea for a story.
Someone's losing the plot.
Now I'm going to get into some spoiler territory because I want to discuss some finer points of the ending. So if you have not seen the film, skip to this time code. My thoughts on the ending were that I love that it pretty much turns into one of these video nasties that she's been charged with censoring. What starts her on this journey is watching the Don't Go in the Church video, where it sparks her memory of those few flashes that she has of the day her sister disappeared, which is her spinning in the woods, and there's a very similar scene playing out in the movie that she's watching. And this starts her on the path down to, my sister is still alive and I must find her. And she's this actress that's in this guy's movies. And he's the one that took her, so I must go find her and free her and bring her home to my parents, and then everyone will love me again, that kind of stuff.
There's this actress. I've got this feeling that's Nina, my sister.
Of course, that's not what happens, because there's some allusions to that she possibly killed her sister or saw her sister killed, because they talk about the guy who murders his wife and eats her face, and then shoots his children, saying that they call him the amnesiac killer because he can't remember it happening. And there's the whole scene where they ponder, well, how can you forget that you did something like that? And the guy says, well, the mind is an incredible thing, and it can censor the traumatic events in our lives so that we can continue on. And that makes her think, oh, I've censored what really happened to my sister. That's why I don't know.
You'd be surprised what the human brain can edit out when it can't handle the truth.
And so she goes on this journey and goes to the producer's house and ends up inadvertently killing him after he attempts to force himself on her, of course. Which I loved that death. That was a very video nasty death of the statue coming through his mouth. That was a great effect. And then she gets to the film set where this actress that she thinks is her sister is supposedly filming her final film, and she thinks that, oh God, they're gonna kill her, I've got to save her. She's completely delusional at this point. And so she gets there and they think she's the other actress, so they get her in the white dress and the blood and everything, and she goes to where they're shooting, and the director is trying to get her like hyped up for the scene, but all it does is like further push her into her psychosis. And so they go to do the scene and she ends up hitting that guy with the axe, which also was a great effect. And the guy, there's like a mouth inside the axe wound. I loved that part. It was so weird and twisted and disgusting. It fit perfectly with the subject matter. And then it's, once again, her mind starts censoring things. So she goes into this mode of super uber happy ending where there's a rainbow and there's birds singing, and this woman is her sister and isn't completely traumatized and afraid of her, and they go in the car and go to the parents' house, and the parents are waiting there with smiles and open arms, and the rainbows above the house, and everything is just perfect and fine and 100% beautiful, they lived happily ever after ending. And of course we know that this is all fantasy in her mind that she's constructed, and really she's just cold-bloodedly murdered a person in front of like 5 witnesses. Well, actually she murders 2 people because she cuts the director's head off. I almost forgot about that. I don't know how I could have forgot that. Another great video nasty visual of that guy's head coming off. But like I said, I really love the subject matter, the way this thing was shot, the lighting, the color scheme, the acting, everything, all that stuff, the whole thing with the video nasties, I love that. There's just a few things that were pretty muddled to me that didn't quite come together 100%, but it didn't ruin the movie for me at all. I really did enjoy it. It's only an hour and 24 minutes, which fits right with that video nasty time frame. They all run about 90 minutes or less, which I thought was a great addition to keep it right at that length that those movies usually have. So if you're a fan of VHS, if you're a fan of horror movies and the shot on video stuff, check this movie out. It's really interesting. It's really well done. Even if you don't like the broader story, you're gonna find something that appeals to you in this film. So go check it out. It's available to rent on Amazon and probably iTunes, all those places. It was only like $6.99 to rent. So go check it out if something like this is up your alley. I recommend it. But that is going to do it for this video. So this is Lindsay signing off. Until next time, I'll check you later.